Hey you guys, my name is Tanisha, but you can just call me Nisha, and I'm back with another movie review. This time I will be reviewing the movie Monkey Man that came out in theaters this weekend. It is produced by Jordan Peele. It also has Dev Patel as his first directorial debut. He is also playing the main character in this movie. So I want to talk a little bit about this movie. As always, I'll give you a brief synopsis of what the movie is about, and then I will give you my personal opinion and perspective about what I took away from the movie. So let's get into it. So when the movie starts off, you have this beautiful story of a mother and son who are spending time together, and they are just enjoying nature, enjoying free time, and she is telling him the story of the deity Hanuman. Hanuman was a god who was half monkey, half human, who projected great strength and wisdom and self-discipline. She was telling him the story of how Hanuman rose up to the sun, consumed the sun, the other gods laughed at him and sent him back to earth, and he lost his power. So he basically rose to ascension and then failed, but then through his circumstances of triumphant times, he was able to regain his strength, his power, and the respect amongst the gods. So as a little boy, probably about 11 years old, kid understood that this was something that he aspired to. They prayed to Hanuman, they asked for strength from Hanuman, and they believed that Hanuman was a good god who would protect the people. Now, as the story unfolds, kid Bobby, I'm going to call him Bobby because that's the pseudo name he gives in the movie. Bobby and his mother lived on this ancestral land with his family and other families in their community, and there was this plan to remove the people from the land, take over that land. There was this friction between the groups, the government, and the people who were running this plan to take over the land so that they could basically commodify the land and use it to gain more money and access and resources. The ancestral people of the land, which was Bobby and his mother and his family and the families alike, they were fighting and resisting against being removed from those lands. So you get this violent takeover to push them out, and in the process of that, Bobby sees and witnesses the brutal unaliving of his mother, and at the time he's 12 years old and he's watching this as it unfolds, and then on top of that her body was set on fire. And so those images, that trauma, that experience never left him, and he forges a plan and decides that he is going to exact revenge on those who are responsible for the killing of his mother. Now, as the story continues, we begin to learn through flashbacks and also through present circumstances that the situation that erupted with his ancestral land and his mother being unalived is a much more greater, elaborate ruling that he will become purposeful in taking that system down. And so now that I've given a synopsis of what this story is about, I want to go into greater detail about the things that I noticed in this movie that made the story such an amazing story. First off, I want to say that the acting was really great, and I loved the storytelling of this. The way that Dev Patel, who is also, he's the actor who plays Bobby, but he is also the director in this movie, the way that he put a lot of effort, heart, and soul and culture into this movie, that he was very passionate about portraying the beauty of being Indian and the heritage of being Indian, and I absolutely loved watching it. They gradually took their time giving you bits and pieces, and while some of the flashbacks could have been, a couple of them could have been taken out, I didn't mind it as much because through flashbacks and also through modern day present circumstances that Bobby was going through, you got to see a lot of the Indian culture. I love the fact that this was a story that was about a human who was exacting revenge on someone. And I know there's a lot of comparison between Bobby and John Wick. Who's better? In my personal opinion, John Wick is kind of like this invincible mercenary, coming from a person who absolutely loves the John Wick franchise. I watched all of the John Wick movies. I'm excited about the new one coming out. And I watched the Continental that was on Peacock. So John Wick is a mercenary who is highly skilled, and he knows combat in every violent form, so he could do it all. Bobby was not that type of person. This was just a man who was heartbroken by the events of what happened to his land and his mother and wanted to get revenge. So you saw a lot of the internal conflict between him and choices that he was making. He worked his way, he infiltrated his way into this elite circle. The woman who was the hotel owner, her name was Queenie, and she was really known in the city. Bobby wanted to gain access, infiltrate the parties and the scenery by getting in with Queenie. So he had this whole thing set up where he staged this stealing of her wallet so that they could get the wallet and he could retrieve it, Bobby, and return it to Queenie so that he could basically get a job from her. He uses the scarring on his hands to tell her that he has basically done the most grittiest jobs, and that if she would allow him to work for him, he would do whatever job she asked him to do, no complaint. And so at first, while she tries to dismiss him with money, after he insists that he will work for whatever price and whatever the job is, she goes ahead and she offers him a job with the warning. So this is how he infiltrates his way into this network, this operation of people. You will find that there are people who are in the religious or the spiritual sector who are also really involved in this. And so as he is going through the motion to infiltrate all of these circumstances, he meets a young man named Alfonso, and Alfonso is kind of like the comedic relief in this movie. Nobody really takes him too seriously. He's the do boy, so whatever he's told to do by Queenie, he does it. He does a lot of, coke, and he's just there. Like, he's not really serving any real purpose, but he is a benefit to Bobby because through Bobby friending him, he's able to learn more about what is going on in this hotel and gain access to the level of floors. He's able to use Alfonso to his benefit, inviting Alfonso to come out to one of his underground fighting matches. Bobby is a underground fighter, and night after night you watch him basically just get the crap beat out of him, and then you start to realize when he's having a conversation with the owner of the fight club, whose name is Tiger, you start to realize that he's intentionally allowing himself to be beaten every night and throw these fights so that he can put on a good show. Tiger even mentions to him, the more you bleed, the more you get paid. I was kind of wondering at first, like, well, why would he consent to being beaten every single night? And there is a more emotional and significant relevance to that in my personal opinion. I want to go ahead and get into my personal takeaways of this movie. One of the things I love about this movie is that there's so much culture infused into this film. I loved the way that this story was told through visual artwork, oral storytelling, and also just through special little things that they show, like for example, stage play with the puppets and how they were dressed in all of their beautiful garb, the temple and the things that they talk about in the temple, the storytelling that is done there through Alpha, who, you know, is the man who actually saved Bobby's life. When Bobby attempted to exact his revenge, it didn't go as quite as he planned it to, because in a moment of getting ready to pull the trigger, he froze, which gave Rana at the time, who was super high on that yayo, he was like almost like this big He-Man. This was just like an average man who was willing himself to get the revenge that he wanted to see exacted upon the people who harmed his mother. He was doing things that probably the average person with no training, no real experience of this type of violence would go through, like hesitating to pull the trigger when you got him right there, making little miscalculations along the way that ends up resulting in him running for his life and then getting shot by the authorities, and he falls into this river. His body was discovered by people of the temple, and this man Alpha brought him to the temple. They fixed him, you know, addressed his wounds, gave him time to heal, and asked him to stay. And during this process, he went through this spiritual moment where he had to atone for the pain that he was feeling, and Alpha gave him a lot of guidance on how to make his motivation to fight be more purposeful. He basically told him that he needed to ascend on a level that would make this more meaningful, which would then make his purpose become his strength and give him the power to fight back. You see him going through these training series, see him unlock this spiritual awakening within him. Is now not only just doing this to avenge his mother, but he's doing this because it's the right thing to do. Because the same people who did this to his mother as he was a 12-year-old child are the same people who are still in position in current time and are still doing this to the people. And then this is when we begin to realize that the person that is orchestrating all of this is also supposedly a spiritual person, Baba Shakti. He is this renowned and revered spiritual guidance person who has his hand in politics and is also manipulating and controlling government to work to remove his own people, exploit their faith, their hope, and then take advantage of that. I want to go into some of my favorite scenes. The scene where the wallet was taken, that's definitely one of my favorite scenes. The fight scene at the end where the temple people show up, and the cool thing about the temple people was that some of them, I believe, might have been trans and some of them were women. And so in this temple, Alpha talks about the balance and how, you know, there's a statue of one of the goddesses that were there and how she was representation of duality. As Alpha talked to Bobby about this, he told Bobby that they used to be warriors. They used to be warriors who fought battles, and then they ended up in the temple, and he has been there overseeing the temple ever since. So baby, when they showed up to throw down, they are dressed in all their beautiful garb and they are ready for war. They have these sickles that were gold and they were dressed in all their garb. And then when those skirts started flying around, and I mean, they went at it. That was probably one of my favorite scenes in the movie. And the third part was when he finally had his opportunity for Rana, and you could see that he was ready for him this time. The first time, Rana basically just whooped him up real good. And the second time he was ready. And as Rana's insulting his mother, he goes in on him. And you see this part where he knocks him down and he's kind of laying on the ground. And he goes and he picks up this heel. And he takes that heel and he just starts whooping on him with this heel. And you could tell that this is a flashback to when he was witnessing Rana whip his mother with the belt, whipping him with his heel, and then finally throws the heel away and then he finishes him off. I love the elevator scene as well. Another cool fighting scene that he's in the elevator and he walks on and he just takes two of them down. They're no match for him because now he has the power and the strength of the people, his ancestors, and Hanuman. Another thing that I wanted to bring up was the reason why night after night he was consenting to allow himself to be beaten. There is a such thing as survivor's guilt, and I believe that because Bobby witnessed his mother be unalived in such a brutal way, he felt powerless in that moment and like there was nothing he could do. He felt guilty for what happened to his mother, and so he didn't feel like he deserved to live, and his punishment was allowing himself to be beaten by other people night after night as a way to make himself feel like he was getting what he deserved. The moment I saw the billboard and it said 35 days till Diwali, I understood the whole point of this part of the cultural aspect. Diwali is a huge holiday that is celebrated in India in October and November. It's a festival that is about lights, and the whole point of the lights is that light is supposed to triumph over darkness. And so I believe that initially when Bobby was wearing the monkey face, the mask, at his underground fighting matches, it was black. And then you see him at one point take the mask and he dunks it down in this water that must be chemicalized. And when he pulls it up, the mask is now white, representing that he has ascended spiritually into this place where he is performing in a sort of righteous vengeance. What he is doing is the will of what is good, what is necessary, and what is right. As I kept watching the movie, there is a character, her name is Sita. She is a woman who is there in the elite room circles, and she is being utilized in the capacity of like a lady of the evening type of situation. And you see Bobby kind of take a concern for her, like an affection for her. And I kept wondering, was this affection based on the fact that he saw his mother in her? They never interacted in any type of intimate way or anything, but as you could see him see her be utilized in ways that lessened her livelihood, the embodiment of being a woman, and that bothered him. And they would show these moments where he would tense up, his fist, may ball up, and he would just be so enraged. And so I kept wondering, was that because he saw, something in her? And her name is also Sita. So Sita also being one of the names of one of the gods in the Hindu belief system, which I'm not really sure what the relation of Sita is to Hanuman. Thought that was interesting too. I'm probably sure there is some connection to that. Loved the scene with the drums, and here's why. As he was fighting this big, huge bag of rice, basically just using it as a punching bag, there is a drummer there who I believe may be mute. Starts beating this bag of rice, and you hear him beating the drums. All of a sudden at the end, they're both like, it's just like this release of energy. It reminded me in my own culture as an African-American woman, how I learned that drums used to be banned from us playing here in the United States because there is something that connects us to a higher source and power, a spiritual motivation, if you will, through the music, through the beating of the drums. And you could see that literally play out in this part of the movie when he was just basically going on those drums, and it just was like giving him the energy, the power. He was channeling that sound into forceful impact, and I thought that was really cool. And the last thing that I want to talk about in connection to the spiritual ascension of Bobby is the levels that he had to go through, the elevator process that they kept showing and making reference to, how he started out infiltrating this from a low level and just having the basis premises that he wanted to get revenge. And so that was the beginning stages, that was the beginning level. But as he became more involved in his processes, including the failing process, so he got to a certain level and then he failed, just like Hanuman failed in the story and had to regain his strength, his purpose. So did Bobby. He had to go to the temple, he had to get that therapy, he had to get that healing that he needed so that his rage could be channeled in a way that would be purposeful and useful to everyone, not just his personal vendetta. His spiritual ascension, finally he rose to the top level of the elevator, which is where he met the real match, which was Baba Shakti, who, it was funny, he makes this statement to Bobby and he says, why don't we just let bygones, and I'm paraphrasing, but he basically says, why don't we just let bygones be bygones? Because if we don't, we're just keeping the cycle going of violence, and who's really going to benefit from that? And as he's saying this, he's plotting to still not change, not redeem himself, and he ends up trying to claim the life of Bobby. And I think that that is something that we see happen a lot in spiritual settings where people believe that they have an infinite amount of opportunity to redeem themselves. No matter how much they continue to repeat the damaging and hurtful and mean and cruel things that they do to people, some way in their mind they correlate that as long as they're living, they have another opportunity at some point to be redeemed for all of the wrongdoing they do. And my personal belief and perspective is that I don't believe in habitual forgiveness. You don't get an infinite amount of times to not redeem yourself and then believe that the very last moment of breath fleeting from your lungs, that's the moment you can redeem yourself. I hate that idea. Those who do go and see it and watch my review, give me your honest opinion on it as well. Okay, bye.